Hello everyone, this is Jeff with Mississippi in the Civil War. I hope you're going to enjoy this episode, and if you do, please give it a like, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. It really helps me gauge the interest and decide how often I should try and put out new content. I wanted to do something for Veterans Day, as this seems like a very appropriate occasion, and I didn't really have anything planned, but I remembered an article I wrote some years ago based upon a letter written by a Confederate soldier from Mississippi, and it seems highly appropriate for the occasion, so I hope you enjoy it. And the letter that I'm going to be talking about was written and published in the Fayette Chronicle on January 9th, 1880. And the letter was written by Thomas B. Manlove of Vicksburg, who was the lieutenant colonel of the 48th Mississippi Infantry. He was a seasoned combat veteran. He was wounded at the Battle of Sharpsburg in September 1862. Recovered from that wound just in time to be wounded again at the Battle of Chancellorsville in May 1863. In the last days of the war, he was wounded for a third time at the Battle of Hatcher's Run. He was paroled and sent to Richmond, where he was when the city was overrun by the Federals, and he found himself a prisoner of war once again. And during the war, the 48th Mississippi Infantry, which Lieutenant Colonel Manlove commanded, was part of a brigade commanded by Brigadier General Nathaniel H. Harris. It consisted of the 12th, the 16th, the 19th, and the 48th Mississippi Infantry regiments. After the war, the veterans of these regiments formed a group known as the Harris Brigade Association, and on November 13th, 1879, the group held a reunion in Port Gibson, Mississippi. And this is a picture of Port Gibson, taken a few years after the reunion, but it still probably looked very similar to this. One of the attendees of the reunion in Port Gibson was Thomas B. Manlove, and the experience of seeing his old command once again, seeing the men that had served under him, really inspired him to write the following letter to the newspaper. And this is what he wrote. He said, "Editor Commercial, I am still lingering among my boys, or the remnant of those who blazed a road to glory under the folds of the Southern Cross. The boys who marched, the boys who fought, the dear, dear boys who died and are sleeping in peace from the blue Potomac to the Rio Grande. Their names are written on a nation's heart, henceforth one and indivisible. To the noble matrons, the fair, beautiful, and ravishing ladies of Port Gibson and Claiborne, and its whole-souled men, my soul goes out in hearty greeting. As for the ladies, they stole my heart away. God bless them and keep them forever. The grand and hearty reception accorded General N.H. Harris of your city and the surviving veterans was sublime, and must have assured them that they keep the key to their hearts of their people and have not suffered and endured in vain. In the annals of the ages, no braver men faced the storms of war or went to battle and immortality than the Mississippians who followed the stainless swords of Jackson and Johnson, Beauregard and Lee. Tell me not the days of chivalry are dead and gone. They live as brightly today as when Sarsfield led the Irish legions on the Boyne, and the helmet of Navarre was the oriflamme of the ivory. They are living in the stories Southern mothers tell their little ones when they tell them how their fathers fought and bled, and they will live till wrapped in flames the realms of ether glow and heaven's last thunders shake the world below." Boy, I have to say, Manlove really had a way with words. He was a newspaper editor and a lawyer, so you know he must have been pretty good at ginning up good words, and boy, he certainly did in this letter. He went on to say, "My friends here are legion, and I am under obligations for constant hospitality. Captain A.J. Lewis, an old comrade and a lawyer of prominence in Port Gibson, and Mr. W.T. Morris, a brother of my honored friend, Judge Joshua S. Morris of your city, whose guest I have been, I desire to thank especially. To Major J.S. Mason of Port Gibson, whose guest I have been, to Major J.S. Mason of the Port Gibson Reveille, whose seeming indifference to the success of the reunion of Harris's brigade has been harshly commented on, I return my heartiest thanks. With sorrow shrouding his home and mourning the loss of his nearest and dearest, he had no heart to take an active part in any of the proceedings, solemnities, or festivities. A parent's grief is sacred, and should not be invaded, even by the injudicious advice of friends whose intentions may be good. A Nestor of the press, our grand old state, though his head is silvered with the harbingers of the grave, his trenchant pen is as flowing and eloquent as ever, and the journal of which he is the head, and at the present sole editor, is a power for good in the land we love. To him I am indebted for the freedom of his office and much valuable information, of which I will avail myself at an early day. TBM. And that was the letter. And less than half a year after writing this letter, Thomas B. Manlove was dead. His obituary claimed that he was a victim of his wartime wounds, which had slowly killed him. Manlove died at the Edwards House Hotel in Jackson, Mississippi. His remains were returned to his native Vicksburg for interment, and he is buried at Cedar Hill Cemetery. And the kinds of comradeship that these Civil War soldiers had, that Manlove had with the men of his command in the 48th Mississippi, it was not unique to that war. I think the men who served in every war form those kinds of bonds. That's what combat does. And I know in my own family, I think the men that served in the wars past had the same kind of comradeship. And I'd like to take just a minute to recognize some of my own relatives that have served. First and foremost is my own father, Joseph T. Gambrone, who served in World War II. He was a sergeant in the 18th Mechanized Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. He was 18 years old. He had just graduated high school, was immediately drafted into the Army in 1944, turned 19 on the troop ship bound for France, and saw action in the closing days of the war. He was sent to a unit that was decimated in the Battle of the Bulge, and served with the 18th Cavalry through the end of the war. And I think the war made its mark on him. And he carried that with him for the rest of his life. And then there was my grandfather, Lindley C. Adams, who was a fireman third class on board the USS Seattle, a cruiser that served in World War I. The war certainly made its mark on my grandfather. He took ill during the great influenza epidemic of 1918, was sent to a tent at a hospital in Brest, France, was not thought that he was going to live. Fortunately, he did pull through, married my grandmother, and ended up having 9 children, one of whom was my mother. Unfortunately, I never knew my grandfather. He passed away being operated on at the VA hospital in Jackson in 1952 for his lungs. I don't think they ever quite recovered from that influenza he had. And then lastly, I'd like to recognize my 2 uncles, Charles Adams and James Adams, both of whom served in the Navy during World War II. My Uncle James served as a radar technician on board the battleship USS Arkansas. My Uncle Charles was an aviation machinist mate, and I'm not sure exactly where he served. I'd like to really know more about his service. And then there was also my aunt's husband, Homer Chancellor, who served as a crewman on a Navy patrol bomber that was lost in the Pacific in the tail end of World War II, and his body was never recovered. But all of these men, I like to remember them and remember the service they gave to this great country of ours. Mississippians have a long and distinguished history of service to the military, be it in the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Persian Gulf, you name it. And these kinds of stories need to be remembered, because these are the people that fought and died for us, for our freedom. And I have a great deal of admiration for them. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. It wasn't very long, but it was heartfelt. And have a great holiday. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment. And please give me a like. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Thank you very much.